Hi guys. No, it is not Vlogmas. It is January and I'm back. So James and I cannot commit to doing regular vlogs on this channel at the moment, but there are a few things that we wanted to record and share, and this is the first of those. And even though James is not here right now, he is supportive and here in spirit. So as I'm sure you will have guessed from the title, this video is going to be largely about our fertility journey, or a kind of a quick synopsis of it. There are a couple of videos around this topic that we would like to make, one for ourselves, but more importantly for those who might be going through a similar situation, who are looking for answers or stories or things to relate to, because that is a big part of what happened for us, especially in the last 2 years. When you're going through something like this, it can feel very lonely, and you search for other stories or inspiration or ideas or good outcomes, or basically anything that gives you more information that helps you feel empowered, because there's very little about the situation that is empowering. So what I want to say from the outset is, one, please be respectful. I am very happy to answer questions or discuss things further, either in a video or sort of one-on-one by email. But what I'm going to share is very, very personal. Right now it really doesn't have a happy ending. But I think that's kind of nearly as important to share as well, because it's so very easy to find and share good positive stories, that while mine has loads of positive and loads of great information for people who are struggling, we, as many of you will know, do not have our baby here with us anymore. We don't have our babies. So if you're looking for a sort of a very quick synopsis of my backstory, I have made a sort of a coordinating blog post that sort of summarizes, and it really is a summation. It's not a detailed sort of list or kind of like order of events. But if you're interested in that, you'll find it in the description box, a link to that blog post. And basically what I'm going to talk to you about is, for 35 years of my life, I was considered infertile. I was pretty much told that my chances of conceiving and carrying a child were non-existent, and that with every passing year that grew smaller. And when I was 25, I was advised that not to have children past the age of 35. I'm now, what am I, 36 and a half? I'll be 37 in June. And both my pregnancies have happened beyond 35. But first, let's start off at the start. I was told I was infertile. About 4 years ago, I was working a really stressful wedding. At the time I was a wedding planner. And we came home after the wedding. About sort of 2 or 3 in the morning, I woke up in excruciating pain. I have never felt pain like it in my life. I was utterly convinced I was going to die. So James wanted to call an ambulance, but I felt, if I'm going to die, I want to die at home. Sort of, this all happened very quickly. We're talking mere minutes, not sort of an extended period of time. James said that if I wouldn't let him call an ambulance, he would drive me to the hospital. So we got into the car, he's driving me to the hospital. We have to stop several times for me to be sick because the pain was so bad. We arrive at the hospital and they do what felt like every test known to man. They had no idea what was wrong. They strongly suspected I was passing kidney stones. but they weren't sure. So all these tests were done, and by sort of mid-morning the following day, I began to feel considerably better, and so I was discharged. I'd say within days, you know, a very short space of time, the hospital got in touch to say that a number of things had shown up in my scans and tests, and that one of the consultants here wanted to have a conversation with me. Would I come to his sort of, you know, department, or, you know, rooms, or whatever you call them. A clinic, that's the word. Would I go to his clinic to discuss them with him? So, to be honest with you, I really didn't think very much. I just thought to myself, he's obviously seeing what I already know exists. So, the cysts and the tumor and so on and so forth. Because in the sort of the panic of everything, I probably didn't give my full and complete medical history like I should have done. Anyway, I go in to discuss things with this consultant, who, as luck would happened to be the head of this particular department, the endocrinology department at the hospital, and a very brilliant, educated, you know, man, amazing man. And so what he started to tell us, James was with me, was that the reason he had called me in was they had done a number of blood and urine tests and scans and x-rays and MRIs, the whole lot. They literally did everything. And that he said that what he was seeing in my test results was something he'd only ever seen once before in his medical career. And that he wanted to look more closely at certain aspects of my body to essentially, he was trying very politely to say to me he was looking for a tumor. Obviously, if you have read the backstory, you will know I already knew I had a tumor on my ovary. And so I was able to tell him exactly where the tumor was. And he was a little flabbergasted that all of the doctors I had been attending and seeing over the last, I suppose at that point was sort of 6 or 7 years, had never once thought or discussed removing the tumor with me. And so this was his primary focus, was to get me to a situation where it was safe to remove the tumor. Now, in the conversation with him and subsequent teams at the hospital, it was sort of, it became obvious that I would lose my ovary. And in an extreme case, I would lose both ovaries, my fallopian tube, and my uterus, as in a full hysterectomy. If they went in and discovered things were more aggressive or more sinister than they believed them to be. So this was, it's weird. At the time, it wasn't a big deal for us because we had spent the previous 6 or 7 years resigning ourselves to the fact that having our own biological children, myself, was probably not going to happen. You know, in the backstory I go into the various things we had sort of done and looked at. And so to be told I would possibly have a full hysterectomy, I don't know if I was just numb or if I just didn't hear it, but it really didn't affect me, which I suppose in one sense was a good thing. So the surgery came along, and I was more interested in getting out of the hospital than I was in anything else. I had this surgery, it was a great success. I came home. A few weeks later, I went into the doctor for the results. And basically, I had already known through the... Ooh! Sasha just jumped off. Hold on 1 sec. Oh, she didn't like the angle. I had already known through the first conversation with the endocrinologist that the tumor I had was most likely a testosterone producing tumor, which was the root cause to most of my infertility issues. As it sort of transpired, I had this testosterone producing tumor that was basically playing havoc with my body and my hormones, and a whole host of things. And I also had polycystic ovarian syndrome, which did similar things too. So the tumor was removed. I went back in for a discussion with the doctor, who told me that I'd actually had the tumor since conception. It was a rare tumor called a teratoma, and in it they found skin, teeth, hair, basically loads of cells that hadn't gone to where they were supposed to go when I was conceived. Within 6 months of having the surgery, I got my periods back. I had not had a period in, I would say, the previous 8 years. We were away in Italy on a wedding. We had just been to see Michelangelo's David in Florence. We went, there's a sort of a cafe kind of around the corner. We were sitting outside. I went to the toilet. I was shocked. And since then, I have had, my cycle is so regular, you could set your clock to it. It is unbelievable. So about 2 years pass, and I'm attending my doctor, his entire team, and it took them, even though my tumor was non-cancerous, it was benign, it took them about 2 years to discharge me from oncology, to be 100% happy and safe that there was nothing else sinister there. Then the plan was for me to lose some weight. They said, if you lose some weight, we will then pass you over to the gynecological team, who will help you with sort of fertility assistance. They had always discussed with me that I would need some form of assistance. They weren't sure if that would just be something as simple as some medication to help, or if it would be something far more invasive. So I began to lose the weight. And within the space of a couple of months, I had lost about 2 stone. During this time, we had made the decision as a couple that I would retire from my career as a wedding planner. I ran a business, James worked in the business with me, and it was sort of our life. It was all encompassing, it was everything that we did. And we sort of made the decision that if we were going to have a family, that the best thing to do would be to reorganize our life. James went back to college, he took another career path, he got a new job. I retired, or I made plans to retire. It was a 2-year strategy. For us, we felt, because my career was so involved, it was never ending, I was on the go all of the time, that if I was to be fortunate enough to get pregnant and have a child, that we were probably going to have to make these changes anyway. So let's do them in advance to make ourselves, or to ensure we were in a better position. So that was our plan. And what we had sort of said was that I would get some sort of job, you know, anywhere, basically in a shop, you know, it didn't really matter, just a job in the meantime until I became pregnant and had hopefully our baby. So my retirement was set for September 2017. In August 2017, I became very ill, and it was the day before a wedding, and I was out picking up the last few bits, and I collapsed. I collapsed in a shopping centre. And the woman who helped me get up said, "You're hardly pregnant." Now, it was the furthest thing from my mind. I thought, I haven't eaten, I haven't really had much water today, I'm probably dehydrated and hungry, you know, I'm stressed about the wedding tomorrow. So I came home and I did a pregnancy test, and it was positive. In fact, I did 5 pregnancies. They were all positive. I was completely shocked, like unbelievably shocked, James couldn't believe it when he came home. We went to the doctor, he confirmed it. Went to the hospital, they confirmed it. And we were just so grateful. We were just shocked. We really were. For me, what made the difference was losing the weight. It's a kind of, I want to say a commonly known fact, but maybe not everybody knows it. By losing just 10% of your body fat, it can make a big difference to your insides. I'm sure there's far more technical ways of saying or doing this, but I had lost, as I say, a little over 2 stone, not quite 2.5 stone. And at some point during that, I became pregnant. And so I had definitely lost more than 10% of my body weight, because I was losing weight through Slimming World. And they sort of, you have like a little award when you lose 10%. They call it a Club 10. And so I knew I had passed this, and I was beginning to feel like amazing. The weight loss was obvious. It was going great. So for me, that was a big thing. Now, at the time, I was on a drug called metformin. The metformin was to ensure, or at least prescribed to me to ensure the regularity of my periods. It also has a added bonus of helping with fertility issues for those who have polycystic ovarian syndrome. Again, I just want to stress that in all I'm sharing with you, I am not a medical professional. This is a summation of my experience and what happened to me, and you should always discuss any changes to your diet or your weight or your medicines with your, you know, team or GP or whoever your primary care people are. But this is what happened to me. We were just delighted with the pregnancy, and things were going well, really well. And then on Halloween, the morning of Halloween, I was just a little over 16 weeks pregnant, so just a little over 4 months. And I went to the bathroom, and I felt this almighty rush of water. And it didn't feel right. I went back to bed. I told James about it. I went back to bed, and I just had this uneasy feeling for the rest of the morning. And so I rang the hospital and I explained the situation to them. And so they advised that it was best for me to come in and for them to take a look and see what might be going on. So my parents came over and drove me to the hospital, and they discovered that night that I had actually lost my waters, and that there was now nothing protecting the baby. And so I was kept in hospital, and they explained to me that there was a very real chance that within the next few days I would deliver my baby, and because of its gestation, the baby would not survive. That while not impossible for me to keep the baby in, that because there was no water around the baby, there was no fluid, that there would be complications with lung development and a whole host of other things, movement, muscle, everything. And I remained as positive as I could. I was essentially on bed rest. I was allowed to go to the bathroom and back to the bed. That was pretty much it. And this was on a Tuesday. On the Saturday, things changed for me again. I could feel my pelvis was starting to split, and James was in college, and I had already been examined that morning, and the doctors said everything, you know, when I say it was okay, everything was stable. It was what it was. I'd even rung my mother to tell her that. And then for me, things changed. As I said, I could start to feel my pelvis splitting, and I rang James, he was in college, and I asked him to come to the hospital. And this was at 10 a.m. and at 25 minutes past 11, I delivered our baby girl. And she was the most perfectly formed little baby. She had her toes and her fingers and like everything was there. Ew, she was just gorgeous. But of course, she was just 17 weeks and 1 day. And she only lived for a few minutes. And we were devastated. Absolutely devastated, because we had no idea that this was even possible. You know, like, you hear, oh, once you get over 12 weeks, it's just a matter of time. Our whole world's changed. Like, we were just, the grief was all consuming. So it was. And the following day, we came home with our baby and the smallest white coffin I have ever seen to bury her. And it is the most surreal thing in the world. It really is. The only thing that James and I knew after this was that we really, really wanted to have a baby. At the time, they didn't know what caused me to lose my water and to go into labor. We now know that because of an incompetent cervix that occurs for me about 16 weeks, basically my cervix is about 4 centimeters, which is common for many, and then sometime around 16 weeks it disintegrates to very little, to maybe 1.5 or non-existent. And that's why my waters went, and then eventually Riley, our daughter, was born. We had planned to try and get pregnant as soon as we could. Not to replace Riley, because nothing could replace her, but because we really wanted children. And so she was born and died on the 4th of November. And by February, we were very fortunate to find ourselves pregnant again. And the hospital were amazing. As soon as we went to them for our first appointment, that sort of registering and an initial kind of appointment, we were set up with a whole host of support services. We were recommended or sort of referred to what they call the preterm clinic, where we met the most amazing doctors who came up with options for us, because at the time they couldn't categorically say why Riley came, or even that my cervix wasn't competent. They laid before us options, and we chose at that time to have what is called a transvaginal cerclage placed, which basically means that my cervix was stitched closed up through the vagina. So basically I had a procedure in an operating theatre with my consultants and doctors, legs up in stirrups. I was awake for it, so you have like a spinal tap, and they sort of basically stitch you closed. That's the long and the short of it is. As an extra precaution, because even with the stitching, when they did the stitching, I was just a little over 15 weeks pregnant, and my cervix was nice and long, but there were concerns that it too would shorten, and what they call funneling, so basically your waters would start to funnel down through the stitches, would occur. So I was placed on bed rest initially in the hospital. I was in the hospital for a week, and then I was allowed to go home to complete my bed rest. Things went really well, and then I had to go into the hospital for an appointment. And the appointment took much longer. There was a lot of waiting. I was about 4 hours sitting around waiting. And when we went home that evening, I had started to bleed. And so we rang the hospital again, and they told me to come straight back in, and they admitted me. And that evening I bled more and more. I bled continuously, and I started to contract. I was not in active labor, but I was, I had an irritated uterus. This was a Thursday. On the Friday, they continuously scanned the baby and me and monitored us. On the Friday, a pediatric doctor came to visit me, and he said that based on the scans, I was 23 weeks pregnant at this point, that my baby was a size and weight that they would consider viable, and to give her the best chance of survival, they wanted to give me some steroids now over the next 2 days in case she came early, so that her lungs would have the best chance. So these were administered in an injection in my hip 24 hours apart. The following Monday, James was with me, and it was visiting time. It was just coming to the end of visiting time, and I could feel things were changing again. I had basically contracted and bled from the Thursday through the weekend. Sometimes I would get an hour and a half between contractions, and sometimes I would get 6 minutes. They were now coming every minute, and so I kept ringing the bell and asking them to come and check on me. Unfortunately for me, it was during their changeover, so a sort of an assistant or an orderly would come to see if I was okay. Eventually I insisted on somebody coming, and I said, I'm pretty sure my waters have gone and that there is something in my cervix. The nurse came down, and she took one look under the bedclothes and hit this button, and within seconds the ward was filled with doctors and nurses and people and equipment, and some doctor took her hand and she stuck it right up me, and I could taste her nail polish. Well, I'm sure she wasn't wearing nail polish, but you get the drift. Basically my baby's cord had prolapsed, as has her foot, and it was now an emergency situation. They told me 3 times on the way to between the ward and getting to theatre that there was no chance that my baby would survive. But she came out alive and kicking. She was born at 9:25 on the 2nd of July, and she literally came out kicking. She was, well, compared to Riley, she was enormous. She was 1 pound 3 ounces. Her name is Sophia, and she was amazing. She was just so amazing. Sorry. She passed away a month later on the 1st of August because of complications of being extremely premature. And our hearts just broke. Like, I was so sure when she was born that it was only a matter of time, despite all the challenges we knew we would face with her, before she would come home. I never once thought she wouldn't be coming home. And again, she came home in a small white coffin. It is the hardest thing to do. The only time you can be with your babies is at a graveside. month after she passed away, we went in for an appointment that was already scheduled. It was an appointment our consultant had made with us after she was born to discuss other options for future pregnancies. It was, I suppose, anyway, the appointment had been made already before Sophia passed away, and we already knew that we wanted Sophia to have siblings. Pregnancy is horrible for me. It is really, really, really horrible. It does not agree with me. It makes me very sick, and I'm not talking about because most of my pregnancies have been spent in bed or in a hospital. That's nothing. I am very ill with them. They completely changed the hormonal makeup of my body, as you would expect. But despite all that, there was a moment when Sophia was, she could have been no more than 2 or 3 days old, and she was in her incubator, and I was just watching her and her legs. She never stopped moving or kicking and I knew that I would go through a million crappy pregnancies for this. Just, she was so perfect. And so it was kind of from that point that James and I very seriously started to research and look at options and to look at scenarios that would hopefully bring us through a successful pregnancy, or at least to a much safer point. And that's kind of what's inspired us to share, as well as to give other people sides of stories and information and options, or even things that inspire a conversation between them as a couple or them with their medical team. And so during this research, we learned of a procedure or operation called a trans-abdominal cerclage, which is sort of a, I suppose, a more serious and in some cases a permanent version of the transvaginal cerclage that I had. And we had hoped that in the appointment that this is something our consultant was going to discuss with us, or at the very least we were going to bring it up and see what he said about it for our situation, because we had learnt that it's not something that is suitable for every woman or for every scenario. And so we went along to the appointment, and thankfully one of the first things he said to us was, have you ever heard of a trans-abdominal cerclage? And to be honest, I was relieved that both he and us were on the same page. And so he explained to us what it was and what it would do for us. And I do plan on making a dedicated video on, you know, specifically my experience about the trans-abdominal cerclage and the transvaginal cerclage. So do keep an eye out for those. But in brief, it is an operation in which you're opened up similar to a C-section. In my case, my incision basically goes hip to hip. It is the full width of my pelvic bone. They sort of lift up your organs or anything that's in the way. They stitch shut your cervix, I suppose, from the top and the inside. It is a permanent fixture for me, as in I will always have the cerclage or the stitch. Any pregnancies I have in the future will be delivered by C-section. You can still conceive in a natural way, and you can still have your period. You can have a miscarriage up until about 14 weeks, I suppose, vaginally, as in normally the tissue would pass downwards. If you were to be unfortunate to lose your baby after that time, you would require a section to remove it. The procedure itself took a few hours. I was in hospital for 4 days, and then on 6 weeks recovery I wasn't allowed to drive or do anything strenuous, no lifting, housework, any of that sort of thing. In my case, there were then no limitations on moving forward with trying to get pregnant. And so I had the operation on the 5th of November, a day after Riley's anniversary. I recovered so well, hence why I'm going to do a full video on it and my recovery, because you read so many different stories. We are now the end of January. I think, what is it? It is the 29th of January today. James and I are actively trying to get pregnant. We are not pregnant as of yet, and that's pretty much where we are right now. Like I said throughout this video, we are sharing our experiences in the hopes that it might help somebody else, or at least lead them onto the path that's going to help them. Myself and James are more than happy to discuss things further. There are a few other videos similar to this that we want to make, hopefully shorter ones. I do want to make a dedicated video on the transvaginal cerclage, on the transabdominal cerclage, also on our tips of what we have been doing in order to get pregnant. So things like diet, vitamins, weight loss, our approach to conceiving and such. I think they would be valuable things for couples who are exploring their options. And there are probably going to be a couple of other videos that I will make as well around this topic, and I'm going to share them in video format on our vlog channel here, what Blah and James did next. And then I also have a blog channel as well, and a blog called A Style of Living, and I will probably put any kind of coordinating blog posts there, because what Blah and James did next doesn't have a website. Like I mentioned, I am not a medical practitioner. I am sharing with you what happened in my situation for my self, as in, you know, so definitely speak with your doctors, your hospital, your team, to see if what I experienced would work for you. I hope this video is useful to you. My big advice to anybody, regardless of your fertility situation, is to take responsibility for your health, to ask questions, to research, to not accept the first answer that you necessarily get, to keep on things, but to ultimately take responsibility. I feel my biggest regret is that I feel we wasted 6 or 7 years of our time in accepting and not questioning what the doctors were telling us, not asking, well, why aren't you removing the tumor, or is that something we should be doing, not asking more definite, defined questions, and almost accepting the fate as carte blanche, because essentially what I was told when I was 25 has really not happened. Like, I know I have been unfortunate to have to bury 2 children, but in one sense that is because of a completely unrelated reason, you know. It is cruel, and it's sad, and it hurts a lot, but I still wouldn't change it to have avoided meeting my girls. Oh, sorry, I did not want to cry this much, but thank you all for watching. I wish you all the very best of luck in your journeys, and I hope we all get the positive end that we're